Hey, this is Seth Parnell, minister at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 197 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing good. Hope you're doing well. I appreciate you being here for tonight. I know it's been a hot one around us. It's the middle of summer. It's the peak of summer. You might say the prime of summer, and so things are going pretty warm out there. And so if you have to get outside and do some things, then I hope you can be someone who is safe in doing that. Stay hydrated, and be careful. Don't get overheated, because I know that can be a problem, especially if you're out here, you're doing some strenuous things. And so enjoy the summer. I love this time of year. I love the hot weather, but there is some danger to it. And so take care of yourself out there. We appreciate you being with us here tonight. As we always do, want to give you an invitation. If you're someone who is in the local area, then come by and see us. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. And right now we're meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. We have going over the book of Acts on Wednesday night. We're in chapter 17, going through the Paul's missionary journeys. He's going to the city of Athens next, I believe. And so stop by. We'd love to see you with that. I believe we're going over Ezra and Nehemiah for the Sunday morning class. And so anytime you can join us, anytime you can see us, we please feel free to come in and stop by. We'd love to see you, love to hear from you. And also, if you have any suggestions for your future episodes, then please feel free to send those our way. We would love to hear from you, love to hear what you have to say, and have you participate in this as well. And also, we're coming up on episode 200. Of the Midweek Bible Study, and so that's going to be pretty cool. We might do something special for that. I don't know yet, but we'll see. That'll be coming up in about 3 weeks, and so something else to look forward to. But let's see here. I think that's all we have as far as our preliminary stuff. We're going to be in Luke chapter 9 here tonight. Luke chapter 9. As you can see, there we go. You can see that a whole lot better. Jesus, at many times, would go throughout his ministry. He'd go about, doing good, as Mark says. He would go about, doing, some wonderful things, and even outside of his, his biggest mission, which was to to bring us, salvation, to give us, what we need in order to have a hope, to be with Jesus, have a hope of salvation. Jesus, he did a lot. But there's also, even though he did so many good things, and even though he did a lot of miracles, he did, just in this chapter, we have the feeding of the 5,000, in which he takes, bread and fish from a little boy, and he multiplies that. He takes it, he gives thanks to the Father, and he distributes it, to over 5,000 people. And it was very impressive, even from a worldly point of view, that was very impressive. But Jesus did all sorts of these things. He walked on water. He healed people of incurable diseases. He even raised the dead. Jesus did a lot of things. He did a lot of things that were impossible for a normal person to do, because he was the Son of God. He was someone who had that divinity, about him. But there's also a lot of things that Jesus didn't do, a lot of restraint that he showed during his ministry as well. As you can imagine, there were things, done, to him, especially during the end, in which, a lesser person would have, lashed out, or a lesser person you would have, given in to the temptation of revenge. A lot of people would have done that. But even when Jesus was hanging on the cross, what was one of the things that he said? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He showed a lot of restraint, during his ministry, during his time. And in Luke chapter 9, we're going to look at a couple of verses here in verses 51 through 55. We're not going to go too long here tonight, but a time in which Jesus shows some restraint, and he tries to teach this to his disciples as well. But it's good to have some people here tonight. It's good to have Jackie Henry. Hope that you are doing well. Appreciate you being here with us. We got the Dunlaps as well. Hope you guys are doing good. Hope you stayed cool today. And we've also got Donna and Vonda and Jim are watching as well. Hope you guys have had a good day and are enjoying this summertime that we have. Appreciate all of you guys being here. But Jesus is going to show some incredible restraint here, and he's going to try to pass it on to his disciples who wouldn't be so keen, to offer this. But we'll see here, and starting off here in verse 51, and we'll see this is going to connect to some earlier passages, as well. But in verse, 51, it says, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And so this sets the timeline for what this happens. See, Jesus is traveling. He has set his face towards Jerusalem. That means he's traveling to Jerusalem. If you're going to go somewhere, you're not going to walk backwards. You're not going to walk, sideways, but you're going to face where you're going. And then you can travel with safety, you can travel with speed, you can travel with purpose. And so when it says he set his face to go towards Jerusalem, he turned that direction, and that is where he is, traveling. But the days of Jesus' ministry are coming short. They are. It's something that is he has been doing this for a little bit, and it's about time for him to go to the cross. And so it says that his days drew near. And so you can imagine the mindset of Jesus. He knows what's going to be in the future. He knows what's going to be ahead. And so but he is traveling. Every step that he takes is one step closer to the cross, one step closer to that betrayal. You're one step closer to being mocked and humiliated and scourged. You imagine how many opportunities Jesus had to just take a detour, to just stop walking, to just turn around, not go to Jerusalem. How many opportunities Jesus had in order to do that? Every step he took, he had an opportunity to go somewhere else, but yet Jesus didn't. It's because of that love that he has, because of that, determination, because of his desire to see us as saved people, as pure people, that he took those steps. He one right after another. He traveled, to Jerusalem, even though he knew what was going to be ahead. A lot of us, myself definitely included, if you know that something painful is in the future, if you know that something is going to be difficult, then you a lot of times either you're going to look for any excuse not to go, or you're going to stop altogether out of fear, or there's a number of things that can happen to you. But yet Jesus didn't let fear dictate what he did, and he didn't let distractions or anything else deter him from this path. But yet he sets his face towards Jerusalem, and that is where he went because of that love that he has for us. And so it gives us encouragement. When Jesus, earlier in this chapter, Jesus will say, if you want to follow me, you have to pick up your cross daily, and you follow me. If you want to be with me, then you got to take up that cross. Jesus never asked us to do something that he himself, could not do or would not do. You think Jesus kind of, metaphorically, with the emotional weight and with the, anticipation of what the future holds. Jesus was carrying a cross, long before he, picked up that wooden cross that he would be nailed to. I mean, the dread that had to be, in the future was something that was extreme. But yet, every step he took, he went towards, Jerusalem. And so if Jesus can take up that cross, if he can be someone who, brings, that forward, then we certainly can, as well, or at least we can aspire to that example that he has set. But here in verse 52, after it says that he set his face to go towards Jerusalem, and verse 52 it says, and he sent messengers ahead of him, and on their way they entered a village of the Samaritans to prepare for his arrival. And so, in our day and time, like if you're going to travel to, say, if you're in Jonesboro here, you're in the area, and you're going to travel to like Memphis, or St. Louis, or a city a ways away, most of the towns that you are going to encounter, you're going to drive on by. You're going to drive through. You're not going to stop at every single town, along the way, because we have cars. We have the ability to travel quickly, and so you may stop, 1, 2, 3 times, on the way, but that's usually, about it. You're not going to stop in every town that you get to. But traveling in this day and age, with the way that they often traveled either on an animal or on foot. They walked, and so being able to resupply, being able to, rest, being able to regather, your resources at these different towns was crucial, to traveling a long distance. You wouldn't be able to pack everything that you need and travel, 500 miles, walking. But they had to go from town to town. They had to travel from one town, get what they needed in order to reach the next town, and that was oftentimes how they traveled. And so they are traveling, and Jesus sends messengers on ahead of him, to a village of the Samaritans. And if you remember earlier, Jesus, kind of caught some criticism, for being so welcoming of Samaritans, for being willing to associate with Samaritans. Remember John chapter 4 and the woman at the well. Jesus goes to a Samaritan city and he talks to this woman at the well, and they have this, biblical discussion, this discussion about worship and about, where you are to worship and about living water. And they talk about, these things. And Jesus was someone who even told a parable about the Good Samaritan, about a Samaritan, who helped somebody out when no one else would. Even when a priest, even a Levite, would pass on the other way, the Samaritan was the only one who did, the right thing. Jesus was around Samaritans, a lot. And so he sends messengers, to this next village to prepare for his arrival, to get everything, ready. As you know, Jesus, the apostles, probably others, were traveling with him. So it was probably a pretty good group that was going forward. And so he wanted to have things, prepared. But when we get to verse 53 here, it says, but they did not receive him because his face was set towards Jerusalem. It says that they did not receive him because his face was set towards Jerusalem. Basically saying they did not receive him because he was traveling to Jerusalem, the place, the capital city of Israel, the place where the height of Jewish culture and Jewish law and everything was in Jerusalem, called the royal city, where David lived in, and where Solomon lived in, where he reigned. And so he was setting his face toward Jerusalem, and when they found out where he was going, where he was traveling to, they would not receive him. They said, they rejected him. They said, we don't want you here. Go away. You're not welcome in this village. And sometimes, if you've ever been in a situation in which, like you're in a room or you're in a place where, you're not really welcome, or when, somebody kind of wants you to leave or can't wait until you leave, that's usually an uncomfortable situation. That's usually not a pleasant thing, to go through. But in this case, they wouldn't even let Jesus, like I said, rest in the city. They wouldn't let him, get food in the city. They said, we don't want you here, go away. You're going to Jerusalem, and so we don't want anything to do with you. As you know, the relationship between the Samaritan people, who were kind of a mix of Jewish ethnicity and some of the surrounding regions and from other Gentile places, and they were kind of mix of that. the relationship between them and the Jewish people was often very tense. The Jewish people would see them as people who were kind of subclass, people who were not as good as they were, as people who were on a lower tier than they were, just because of how they were born, or just because of uh, what their ancestry was, and they looked at them in that manner. And so that was one of the motivations for Jesus telling that parable of the Good Samaritan, because he wanted to let them know that it's not those who your father is, it's not your ancestry, it's not those external factors that you have no control over that dictate what you do, but it's the heart of a person, it's the character, it's the decisions that they make that is what makes a person. And that's what the Good Samaritan showed. But this is often told from the Jewish perspective, but this went both ways. And there were Samaritans who didn't like the Jewish people at all either. And so this hatred went both ways. And as when they found out that this man was traveling to Jerusalem, they said, no, you're not going to set foot in here, keep going. And so, which is a big inconvenience, like I said, when you're traveling from town to town. But yet, this is what had happened. And so Jesus, the Savior of the world, the Son of God, you can imagine. I don't know if you imagine if anybody in this town, would became a Christian, later on, they might have thought back to that time. Jesus came to our town and we said, go away. We rejected him. What do you think that would feel like if one of those people realized that would be something to maybe to listen to somebody talk about. But they said, we will not receive him because he is faced towards Jerusalem. Even though Jesus did so much for the world, there were still people who did not welcome him. And it's still true today. It was true back then with this city, and it's also still true today. Some people will not welcome Jesus wherever he is. But in verse 54, it says, when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? And this is an interesting response. Jesus doesn't say anything on the initial, but when the disciples see this, they are either filled with anger or filled with indignation. And James and John are called out specifically, and they ask Jesus, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Now it's interesting that James and John say, Lord, do you want us to call down fire here from heaven? They don't say, Jesus, you should call down fire from heaven and destroy the town. They want to do it themselves. They have the confidence that they have the power in order to do this. Just like, as Jonah sat outside the city of Nineveh after he preached to it and waited for it to be consumed by fire. James and John wanted this to happen to this Samaritan village. And because they did not welcome Jesus, and so they lashed out with a sense of wanting to put them in their place, wanting to show just how big of a mistake that these people had made, rejecting the very Son of God. Could Jesus call down fire from heaven? Of course he could. Could the disciples, through the power of the Holy Spirit, call down fire from heaven? I certainly believe they could if they needed to. But what was the reason behind this? What was the motivation behind doing this? As we'll see here in verse 55, it says, but he turned and rebuked them. And then they went on to another village in verse 56. And so they ask this question of Jesus, do you want us to call down fire and just wiped out this entire city? I mean, we're talking about the lives of people, the lives of this entire village. This is the apostle of love, John. This is the writer who later on in 1st and 2nd John would say, little children, I don't give you a new commandment, but an old one. Love one another. Love your neighbor. God is love. That's the same guy who right here is saying, let's call down fire and consume these people. It's not hypocritical. We know that John grew just like Peter did, just like Paul did. They grew in the faith and they became different people as they matured more in their faith. But he says, they want to show just how powerful they are, and to show how big a mistake these people made. But Jesus, he turns and rebukes them. Now, this is interesting because if you go a couple of passages up here in Luke chapter 9, he talks about the transfiguration. We have the transfiguration recorded, and in verses 28 down through verse 36, and if you and they. And during that time, as we know, the apostles, saw Jesus, they saw Moses, and they saw, Elijah. Moses was somebody who dealt, with, the pillar of fire, and he was someone who had the 10 plagues, and Elijah would do his share of, miracles as well. And it seemed like the apostles were kind of inspired by this and saying, let's do like some of these things these mighty men of old, did as well. But yet, Jesus, tells them, that mercy, and grace, is something that's much more important than feeding your ego, or than, promoting yourself or flexing your muscles, here during this time, or lashing out, in anger. As he say, was this the right thing for this village to do? Well, no, it wasn't. They should have welcomed Jesus. They should have, welcomed with open arms, listened to what he has to say, and become, a follower of Jesus. But yet, they rejected him just because of where he was going. But was this a cause for them to be, completely, destroyed? Well, no, it wasn't. We're not going to be a group of people that's going to call down fire from any place and, consume some people. But we will have opportunities either, verbally or emotionally or with our actions. We will have the opportunity to cause, damage, to be someone who hurts a person, or someone who is able to cause, some pain, to a person, in response to maybe a rejection that we have had, as somebody, does you wrong, if somebody, is very, apprehensive, to you, if they cheat you, or there's someone who is kind of pushed back against you, it's be very easy sometimes for us to push right back, and lash out, and, show, you don't mess with me. But what does Jesus do here? It says that he turned, he rebuked them because what they asked was wrong, and says then they went on to another village. Jesus didn't, stand there and, lecture, the people about why they had made a mistake. He just went on to another village. Sometimes the best thing to say is nothing at all. When we know that our words are only going to be, wrapped in anger, when we know that our words are only going to be, crossed over and, wanting in pain and wanting to lash out, sometimes the best thing to do is to not say anything, at all. And the only thing that Jesus said was he rebuked, his disciples, and went on to another village. And which you can imagine is like kind of the deflation of their ego at this time, because they had the confidence to say, Jesus, let us, call fire down from heaven. They thought that they were really on top of the world. They were the man. They could do this. But instead, Jesus, he, rebukes them. And I wouldn't want to be on the end of a rebuke, from Jesus. But sometimes it was necessary. And in this time, it was. They had not learned to see people through the lens of love, quite yet. Because treating people with love means loving them when they do right by you, and loving them when they do wrong as well. loving them when it's easy, and loving them when they make it difficult. Not everyone's going to make it easy for you to love them, but sometimes people make it pretty hard. And Jesus, sometimes you have to put distance. You have to just walk away, and that's what Jesus did. You hear he just goes on to another village. But if we are a people who push towards that mindset, we can through the power of God, and through the goodness that he gives us, we can be a people of love and not people of anger. As he called back to Jonah earlier, he wanted to see he wanted to see the city of Nineveh destroyed, and brought to ruin. But instead, what God wanted to see was people obeying his word, but people who would worship him, would obey him, and be a part of that plan that he has. And that's what he wants for us today. And so you may see on the news individuals who say some very awful things about Christianity, about the church, about God. You may see them even say awful things about things that you believe in, things that you like. But how should we treat those people? We don't have to go and high five them and hang out with them. We don't have to be your best buddies with them. But we do need to treat them with love, and not with anger. We don't return evil for evil, or someone who returns evil with good, because we've been blessed by a Savior who gives us that forgiveness. And that's something that's pretty special. And so this is a principle that Jesus lived by, even up to the cross. Like he said, when he was on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." When he could have called, as that song says, he could have called 10,000 angels, but he didn't. He stayed on that cross, and because of that, we have hope. And so, the interesting story here in Luke chapter 9, verses 51 and through 56. But I think that's where we'll stop here, and we will continue on next week. We will have episode 198, and we will see what we can get into next week, see what we can get from the Word of God. I appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate every week. I know it's a lot of times you get busy, and a lot of times that there's a lot of things that you spend your time doing. But the fact that you spend just a few minutes here with us on a Thursday night is very much appreciated. So we hope that you have a wonderful night tonight, a wonderful rest of the week, and I hope you can go out and glorify God in everything that you do. Catch you next time.